Hey folks, Josh Neighbors here. This is the College Countdown. On today's show, the transfer portal rule is out there. The coaches are proposing. What do we think of this? Do you think they'll be able to get this thing through? Let us know. That's our question of the day. And let us encourage you all to like the video, subscribe to the channel here on the College Countdown, part of the Rogue Media Networks. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave those comments. They all help. Also, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts on all podcast platforms. That is helpful as well. Trying to think if there's any other admin we need to take care of. And I think that should be good. And I think we are good to rock and roll here on the show. So yeah, we saw this proposal the other day from the coaches convention. In a unanimous show of support, football bowl subdivisions, FBS as we say, coaches voted Tuesday in favor of a proposal that would reduce college football's transfer windows to a single 10-day period in January in an effort to preserve the integrity of bowl season and put guardrails on a system many coaches lament as entirely broken. All right, so a couple things here. This portal window, coaches supported the move to a single portal window from Jan 2 through Jan 12, starting for the 25-26 academic year. Such a move would eliminate the current portal windows both in December and in April. With a single shorter window, the recommendation now moves to the NCAA Oversight Committee and ultimately the NCAA Division I Council for approval, which is far from guaranteed. So there's a couple things to tackle here. There is the idea that this is needed, which we all agree with, or the idea that this will work, which I don't think it's going to work. And I guess, I think we'll start with the latter part first. The reason why this will not work is pretty simple, right? If you think about what's been happening for the NCAA in court recently, they lose all the time. I think I forgot who it was from USA Today that I read, and they compared the NCAA in court to the Washington Generals because they have just, they're basically there to get killed. And it's been a rough go for them, whether it's been the Ed O'Bannon ruling, the Diego Pavia ruling. Now, I know it's not court technically, but like the House ruling that's coming down. I mean, whenever somebody is discussing the payments, the freedoms that are owed to college athletes, and even when it goes before the Supreme Court, typically it's going to go against the NCAA. And the reason for that is that let's just take this transfer rule, for example, right? The coaches are getting paid. You could argue the players are paid, and sure, they are paid for play, but the way this thing is technically written, name, image, and likeness, they're not getting paid for their name. They are getting paid for their name, image, likeness. That's what it's there for, right? So they're there to get paid, through the businesses, right? Technically speaking, you do something for a business, for a collective which is made up of businesses, you render service to them. And they cannot pay you for performance. They cannot do that. That's the NCAA maintains that you're still an amateur athlete. They still, want to maintain that. This is why they've kept saying they want to move NIL in-house. It's not NIL in-house if the school is paying you because the school's paying you to play, right? But NIL is name, image, and likeness, not, 10 catches, 500 yards in 12 games, game check. It's a different thing. LeBron is paid by Gatorade because he is a player, but Gatorade's not paying LeBron for scoring 30 points a game. The Los Angeles Lakers are, right? So that's kind of the big difference here. And so when it comes down to why the NCAA cannot enforce a lot of their rules upon athletes, it's because they are not employees. And so you cannot do things like enforce a non-compete clause. And I'm no legal expert, but if we're going to have a ruling like Diego Pavia's where they're saying, hey, the experience in college football of playing at a JUCO, because it's 2 years and because it's not, not as well represented, is not analogous to playing at a 4-year institution. Therefore, the JUCO years you spent don't count against your eligibility. Well, then, let's just assume that everything else is going to be kind of go that way as well, and it has been, right? Name, image, and likeness is here because, hey, you can't control a player's name, image, and likeness. They own those things. And so I think that's why it's going to go this way. If you want more regulation, what you're going to have to do is make these guys employees, right? And I've got no problem if these players to play college football enter into employment agreements and sign 2-year contracts they can't get out of, then they should have to honor those 2-year contracts. I think it's good that these guys, learn the ins and outs of business. They learn the virtues of business. They learn to how to do and how not to do a lot of these things. I think it's important that they do that, right? And if they have to, the players have to learn some lessons the hard way, that's fine. That's a lot of life, right? But you can't enforce things upon these players right now like a transfer limit or a transfer portal window, because the whole thing is, like one specific window, because they could argue, like also the school part of it too. Hey, I can't transfer to a school at a certain time, right? At this time. And how can they enforce this right now? Because I am not an employee. There is no way you can enforce a non-compete on a non-employee. It's just not fair. It's just not allowed. And when it goes to court, they're probably going to lose, just like they've lost all the time. And so I know the coaches like this, and it wrangles a lot, but as soon as any players mount legal challenges to it, why should we expect that it goes different than any other time someone has tried the NCAA and said, all right, try and impose that. See you in court. Because it's gone against them every single time. So I don't know why we would assume this is going to go much different. There's no reason to think that this will go any different. None of that at all. And so I'm wondering here, the coaches aim, like, this is great, but they need to recommend some kind of employment contract. Now, the issue with this is it might exclude a certain amount of schools, and we'll see. I think it's going to end up being like 35 to 40 schools in the end are part of what a super league looks like. But the best way to control this thing is going to be that, because with every single legal challenge you lose, coaches' jobs become more difficult because players have more freedom. And those coaches have taken on the role of general manager. And so the coaches are the ones, it's as rules get more lenient in other sports, player empowerment happens, the job for general managers becomes a bit more challenging. The job for coaches, yes, you have to manage egos, but you've always had to manage egos. You've always had to manage players. And so managing the guys who are available to you has always been the job. Like, I don't envy Eric Spoelstra having to deal with Jimmy Butler right now. That's not really always been something that's happened, but there have been unhappy guys before. Phil Jackson had to deal with Dennis Rodman and Michael Jordan. Was a great player, obviously, but not easy to deal with. Kobe Bryant and Shaq didn't get along, and Phil had to manage that as well. Right? Players don't get along, and coaches have to manage that, and that's part of the deal. It's why Chip Kelly sucked. He was terrible at managing personalities. Okay? But in college, the coaches' jobs get harder because these guys are in charge of talent acquisition and talent assessment and running this team, and it's too difficult on these guys. But it's too much. It's too much to manage for them. That's why I want to get this under control somewhat. And so I think we're all in agreement they have to narrow the windows. But if we're still doing this by the academic calendar, then you're going to run into some issues. And that's why I'm thinking, like, we need to think about the one time to do it. I'm a big believer that the idea of pushing back spring practice and kind of going the OTAs route might be the best way to go. I'm starting to think that's the best way to handle this. That's the best way to approach and think about what's happening now in college football and in college sports, is going that OTA, the OTA route, going with going with that spring, right, or the January window. Guys can transfer, get acclimated and everything, and then your OTAs / whatever are happening in August. And I think it's good that we don't have like a spring, I don't need a post-spring practice window. If a guy wants to sit out for a year and maintain his eligibility, he's allowed to do that. But I don't think we need a window where a guy's in the portal, a guy's a good camp and starts extorting the school for more money. Like, I think if you're going to sign on in January, sign on for a certain amount of money. 10 days, a bit too short for me. I would go like a month or 14 days. especially because you can add and drop classes, and it's not like the end of the world. Also, we have to stop treating these guys like they're normal athletes. They're not. So for them, like the classwork, a lot of it can be done online. A lot of these guys, they keep eligible. And once again, their goal of the education is not to get these guys a great education. The goal is to keep them eligible. So the eligibility part of it is not a huge deal. So I like the idea of one window. I would extend it a bit further. I would allow those guys to take the online classes. But the one thing that has to go to necessitate all of this and to make this possible is going to be the employment side of it. They're going to have to make these guys employees in order to treat them like employees, to put non-competes on them, to restrict their movement, to put a number of years, talk about how much money, to not keep getting extorted, all of that stuff. Now, it's going to come with some rights. It's going to come with, the insurance and whatnot and all those things. But, athletic departments are spending every single dollar they have right now. They can't keep paying coaches as much money as they are. Those coaching contracts are going to have to come down from $10 million and have to go down to about $5 million, in that area. And they're going to have to start cutting number of support staff and all that stuff. And yes, other sports, softball, rowing, women's gymnastics will have to, become club or supported in different ways, but we don't need Maryland softball going to play Oregon and Washington. We don't need that. And so to me, I don't have much of a problem if those sports go club, if they still have support. It sucks that, whatever, but like these schools have been trying to make as much money as possible for forever. And so at least if we're going to keep doing that, let's have some of the athletes benefit from that. And I can promise you this, it's nice to travel, but all these athletes are not benefiting from conference realignment where these schedules are crazy. And the whole thing is conference realignment's happening. Like Maryland is playing Oregon in softball. So the folks that run Ohio State and Purdue and Maryland and Ohio, all those places can make more money. Those student athletes, they might get to see more of it in their facilities and whatnot. But man, like that doesn't help. That doesn't make the plane ride shorter. That doesn't make it a longer way from home for those two games. You're having to go one weekend to the Midwest, one weekend back home, one weekend to the East Coast, one weekend back home, one weekend back in the Midwest, one weekend back home. And think about the Big Ten. You are in Pennsylvania and you are in Maryland and Ohio and Michigan and Indiana, Illinois, all of those places. And then you're going to Washington and Oregon and California. It's ridiculous, but it's so people can make more money. So if we're going to be going that route, and that's the route that college athletics has gone in, if we're going the make money at all costs route, let's at least have the players profit from it somewhat. Let's at least have that. I think that's the most equitable and fair way to do it. So I'm cool with the window. Let's let's make them employees. We're going to eventually call it free agency, but I'm cool with the window. I just think legally it's going to lose. I don't think it's going to get, and once again, I'm for it. That's what I want, but I'm just telling you what I think, at least from listening to everybody who knows about this. From what they've all said and described about the situation from a legal standpoint, it's going to be hard for it to hold up. We'll see, though. We'll see what happens, but I think it's going to be hard to hold up. All right, find me on Twitter at @JoshNeighbors_. You can find the show wherever you get your podcast. Some final picks over the course of the weekend / on Monday for the championship game and more coming up on the College Countdown. Also, we'll get into some basketball next week as well. Once again, at @JoshNeighbors_, at CC Podcast JN. Like the video, sub to the channel. See y'all next week.